dear friends and fellow progressives. Welcome to Berlin.
So, welcome to the final session of the Progressive Governance Summit 2024. And this session will be, I guess, a courageous attempt of summarizing what we've been talking about for the last 2 days. And I'm very happy that this task will be delivered by wonderful speakers of the session that will be chaired by Miebach, a member of the board of das Progressive Zentrum, one of the founders of das Progressive Zentrum. And the session has a very exciting topic, election time again. Michael, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Yeah. I'm very honored to chair this last session. I'm glad so many of you stayed. We have 30 to 40 minutes now to talk some politics. And I'm not going to do that alone, but with some tremendous speakers. Please welcome Benedetta de Marte. She's the Secretary General of the European Green Party. Please sit here. And she's also a local politician in Brussels, so she has both perspectives. Then please welcome Carys from the UK. She's the executive director of IPPR. She's an economist with research interests in wealth inequality and labor market. And last but not least, the wonderful Werz from the US. He's a German citizen, but he has been living in America for many years. And he's a senior advisor to the Munich Security Conference and a senior fellow at CAP, Center for American Progress. Now, what are we trying to do? We are going to talk about two things. The first topic will be campaign. The second topic will be projects for renewal for the center-left. This might not be the perfect summary of our conference, but it might give you all some ideas to bring home. That's at least what I hope. I was asked, because we have a super election year in Germany as well as in the UK, as well as in the US, and we just had on European level. So I was asked at first to talk a little bit myself about the situation in Germany, and my personal impression was that we discussed a lot, but that the situation that is really dire in Germany after June 9th didn't get enough attention, maybe for some of, especially the international guests. So what I would like to tell you is that the European and local elections in 8 states for the traffic light government were really a big defeat. I would like to talk about the local elections first, because they are under the radar, but also very important. And I would like to focus on the local elections in Eastern Germany, in all 5 East German states. And you know, that is the former GDR, which is less wealthy than in average. They had local elections there. And the AfD managed not to get the head seats of local municipalities and towns, but they won. In most areas, they are now the strongest force in local councils. Even in those regions where the government poured billions of euros into, where there's structural reforms taking place, even those regions, they are very successful. Second, the share of smaller parties developed very strongly, so there's a big sense of fragmentation. For example, in the state of Thuringia, out of 4,000 local candidates, already 25% are from smaller parties that most of us don't really know, or independent candidates. Now to the European elections. Just to sum it up right quick, the Greens lost big time. The SPD got its worst results in the history, And the third partner in government, the FDP, was slightly above the national threshold of 5%, while the AfD came in second, despite massive scandals and manifestations in all of the country against right-wing extremism. And in Eastern Germany, they came in first. So just to give you a small overview of where we stand. Then we had exit pollings, also very interesting, I think. Interesting for all of us. The amount of people that have many worries increased. Of course, cost of living, crime, stuff like that. But what I also found very striking, that even among social democratic voters, and realize this, almost 50% of SPD partisans say that you cannot say independently, freely, what you really mean in Germany. And that really, I think, is a warning signal that some of the rhetorics of the right fill in to the middle ground. So to sum up, don't want to talk too long, my analysis would be demonizing the right-wing populist did not work. Government communication is very, very difficult against right-wing populists. They had very good posters on the walls. One of them, just to give you a little anecdote, was, "Your neighbor votes for us too." Mobilization was a big problem. That also has to do with the European election itself. I talked about fragmentation. Fragmentation is the new reality. We have to deal with it. And last but not least, there were many non-voters that can be won back. So that's a sign of hope there. So to start with this negative outlook, but you know, it's not all European championship out there. There's also this grim reality that we have to face. I would like to bring in you, talking about strategies, possible issues, and positive examples of what worked. Benedetta, I said you were from Brussels. You just told me before that you are now negotiating who gets which post and who elects whom. The Green Party family has lost 20 seats altogether. She's now at 51, but the rest of the party groups in the EP, that's at least my understanding, correct me, was pretty stable. So isn't that a contradiction to the negative result for the Greens? So what happened there? Why is everybody else stable and the Greens lost so badly? What's your analysis?
Well, first of all, hi everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation that was really, really something we were looking forward after the European elections to reunite with progressives and also talk about what happened and what is going on and what will happen in the future. Now to the election results, I will disagree a little bit with your analysis because first of all, we are hopefully set to lose a little bit less seats than what you said because we are still constituting our group and it looks like there is quite a lot of interest from some independents also to join the Greens. So hopefully we will, which is a tradition that the Greens have to have quite many independents, including Volt. We are looking forward to their vote, but it seems that they are more likely to stay with us than to go with the Liberals. And also, I would say the biggest losers, numbers-wise, were definitely the Liberals in these elections in the European Parliament. So, of course, if we look at the result of the Greens, this was a disappointing result. Nobody among us was expecting to have an equal result than in 2019, which was an exceptional year where the Green Project was very strongly carried by a strong civil society movement and a climate wave, green wave. So we knew we were not set for such a result. However, what is very interesting in these elections is that, yes, the Greens had setbacks in quite some countries, including the two biggest delegations that we have that wait for a huge part of our MEPs, so the German and the French. Of course, we had setbacks also in quite a lot of countries where we have been in government, like Ireland, like Belgium, like to a certain extent Austria. But we also have seen rebounds in countries where we had been in government and we kind of got out of government recently, so in the last year or a few months. So both in Luxembourg, in Finland, and in Sweden, we had encouraging results. In Sweden, a very, very good result, and in Luxembourg and in, what was I saying? In Luxembourg and in Finland also rebounding compared to the national results recently. And the best story for us from a perspective also of the European Green Party, we come out of these elections with a much more diverse group, because we were actually able to elect for the first time in a lot of countries, especially in Central Eastern Europe, where we didn't have parties at all in 19, and where we now have our own new parties, like Latvia, Lithuania, Croatia, Slovenia, and also Romania. And we had some surprising results also in the south. I'm from Italy. We re-elected MEPs in Italy after 15 years, which was a very also surprising story of these elections, thanks to a coalition with the left. So it was not a black and white result as it might look from the numbers. And it also tells a story, especially when we look at another part of Europe, Nordic Europe, where the far right has been in government in the last years. We see a strong rejection of their political project, and this is something that allows me to maybe strengthen one point, which, yeah, you were saying demonizing the far right has not worked in these elections. I tend to agree with the fact that putting the far right at the center of the campaign didn't work, and not focusing enough on what the far right does when they govern. Because and this was something that we were trying from the EGP, of course it's difficult, to really show the examples of failed policies of the far right when they govern, that they are completely incapable of carrying a vision for the countries they want to govern, and especially from the social point of view. Like they promise a lot, but they are absolutely not delivering, and they are, in most cases, as neoliberalist as you can be in economic policies. So I think this didn't work. It was what doesn't work with people anymore is just to call everyone fascist, because this is not, unfortunately, speaking to their hearts anymore, and it's a very worrying sign of our democracy that it does not, but we have to take into account that it doesn't, and not speaking, maybe in some cases, as progressives enough about our own project. We as EGP, we put forward this narrative of courage, which resonated a lot, we felt, and we have seen that where our parties have put much more in the center their own policy, and especially the conjugation of green and social policy at the same time, this worked much better than in those countries where they were on a much more defensive position, also because, of course, in many cases, they were coming out of government, and we know how hard it is sometimes to also kind of retain that self-confidence when you are attacked from all sides.
That's very interesting, and I think it fits well with a lot of stories that we heard throughout the conference. That seems to be something we can agree upon, and I would bring in Carys here. How do you deal with the Reform UK as Labour, and what can you tell us about the unstoppable Labour Party? What are they doing right? What is Keir Starmer doing right and wrong? Where must Labour maybe improve? What's your impression? What can you tell us from the campaign trail?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here, and it's a real honour to be able to be the kind of bringer of good news from the UK, as we've heard from other speakers over the conference.
For once.
So I think it's worth kind of just setting out a little bit about what's happening in the UK. Labour do look to be on course for a landslide victory on July the 4th. And the flip side of that is that the Conservatives are on for a historic defeat. They're set to get fewer seats than they have ever got in their entire history, despite being the oldest party in Europe, I believe. A couple of things are happening there. So one is that the right is split. So we have the rise of Reform, particularly Nigel Farage, who I think their fortunes very much pinned him as an individual. But there's also this sense that everything is broken in the UK. And when you speak to people, they can't get a doctor's appointment. The trains don't work. They can't get to work. If you live in the north of England, for example, it's not reliable as a form of public transport. And so there's a sense of wanting to get the Tories out. On the Labour side, I think what they have managed is an incredibly efficient campaign, and not just in this particular moment, but over the past year or two. We have a first-past-the-post system in our democracy, and that means that your vote share doesn't necessarily correspond to the seats. So I think one of the really interesting things that will happen at this election is that Labour might win a landslide. It will get pretty much the same proportion of votes as it did in 2017 when it lost. So this isn't necessarily a story of kind of a national outpouring of enthusiasm for Labour. A lot of those votes are lent, and it's partly about that incredibly efficient campaign that they've run to think about which seats they need to win, who they can persuade in those seats, and which messages and policies are going to land with them. And so you see lots of themes that we've discussed over the past couple of days, such as restoring trust, restoring respect. And I think the other thing that they've done quite effectively is try and get some of those, some of their kind of bigger, bolder ideas out early, so that they're less kind of controversial when they come up in the campaign. The other thing
can I ask one question? Because I've been looking into the Labour manifesto, and to be honest, I found it a little bit boring. Not very bold.
Back on.
Cutting spending, less waiting times for NHS, okay. 6,500 additional teachers. I think in Germany we lack 40,000. To me, it sounded a little bit modest. Is that a strategy or is it a mistake?
It's definitely the strategy. You can potentially disagree with whether it's a correct strategy. What I would say is that there are quite a few furrows in that manifesto that actually are bolder than they're potentially kind of presenting them as. So, for example, you have rail nationalisation, and you have the creation of Great British Energy, which would be a publicly owned energy producer. So there are quite ambitious proposals in there. Where you are exactly right is that they've been very quiet on tax and spend, because that is a perceived area of weakness, particularly with those voters that they're trying to win over. Now, that might be the best political strategy, but I do think when it comes to governing and actually delivering the sorts of changes that people are demanding, they probably will have to revisit that.
Right, and we're going to talk about that in round two, but I would like to ask Michael. Michael, I mean, everybody's looking now into the US. Let's just do it. Let's start with Donald Trump. From the outside, I mean, he is a convicted felon now, if I understand it right. So it should be easy to convince the average Joe that he is unreliable. How are Democrats trying to do this? And how do they deal with Donald Trump? And does it work the way they do it, in your perspective?
Yeah, nothing is ever easy in the United States. You know that. That's the predicament of our society and of our two-party system. The 34 felon convictions of Donald Trump have an impact. They have made about 1/5 of the independent vote, which is important since the election is going to be so close. Think about the fact twice, whether they are willing to vote for a convicted felon. I think what is interesting and important is that we are in a very unique situation in the United States because we are in a phase of radical introversion. We're looking at our own country, not at the world anymore. The last three presidents, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, were elected on the promise to extract us from Iraq and Afghanistan, 20-year war that has cost us on average $200 million a day. And we also live in a time where 40 to 50 million prosperous middle-class Americans will vote for Donald Trump for the third time. This is not only about material needs, it is also about immaterial needs that makes these people move into that direction. The Biden administration is trying to address these issues with three strategies. A is the massive investments that we've made over a very successful legislative period. The three major legislations that have invested in infrastructure, COVID relief, and education have roughly the volume of 9 times the German federal budget. This is serious money, and we hope that the investments will pay off over the summer. We have virtual full employment, substantial economic growth rates, so the overall situation is okay. People are nevertheless in a bad mood, as they are here in Germany, so they're complaining at a very high level, but that's not for us to criticize. Second point that will hopefully win Joe Biden the election is women's rights and abortion. The substantial limitation of abortion rights in the United States has been the first case in recent history of limiting civil rights for a certain group. That doesn't play well even in the more conservative constituency, and the hope of the Democratic campaign is that 5 to 10% of the voters that supported Nikki Haley in the Republican primary, there were anywhere between 20 and 30% of the registered Republicans, that they might be amenable to either not vote for Donald Trump or close their eyes, get skin rash, and vote for Joe Biden. And the third part is addressing the immaterial dimension. The campaign, surprisingly, is strongly investing in questions about the rule of law, normativity of what America stands for, and democracy. And I think that is very important. That was a strategy that was really contested in the White House, because there were still a lot of the old Clintonites that said it's the economy, stupid. But it's not only the economy anymore. It is about that immaterial need of people that are looking for orientation in a disorderly world. And that's why the campaign will establish democracy, American tradition, the fact that we had 233 years of democratic power transfer and elections as the third pillar of the campaign between economic prosperity and women's rights.
One question, and please answer briefly. We all read that the Biden administration is strengthening the border rules. How does this, those elements and the topic of migration fit into this strategy?
The Biden administration is doing two things at the same time. They are opening pathways to legal immigration, or to legalization of people that have been in the country in an undocumented state. And they are also, at least rhetorically, toughening border control. They are trying to do this kind of at the same time. It's a little bit of a stretch, but it is necessary because migration in the United States is a decisive factor in the election. It's a political minefield, as it is in virtually any Western society. Interestingly, migration as the top priority for people to making their electoral decision becomes more and more important the closer you get to the Canadian border. So it is, again, a phenomenon of immaterial needs, if you will, of people voting on migration issues in East Germany, where there's very little migration, or people being mobilized with anti-Semitism in Poland, where there's very few Jews. So I feel that the administration is trying to take a pragmatic approach. Our southern border is broken, especially the processing system of incoming people. At the same time, part of our economic strength is the fact that we have over 1 million immigrants a year. We probably need 2 or more, qualified and unqualified, and that is also helping us not only with a lower average age and much more prosperous minority communities. Just to give you one, you asked for a brief answer. One data point: we're the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, 67 million Latinos. They have roughly the GDP of Italy, and with 18% of the population, they are establishing 2/3 of the newly established private companies.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Very interesting. In the second round, I would like to shift the discussion a little bit on mid-term and longer-term projects for the center-left. This conference, as I said, is also about sharing ideas. And I would like to ask all of you what you think could be a project or projects for the center-left in the next 1 to 5 years. Because I personally believe that center-left parties also have to be interesting. You know, we sometimes have to come up with new things that can enthusiast, if not the people, at least the public opinion. And I thought about, can I even answer this question myself? And I would like to share one thought with you quite briefly. I think that we could talk more about regional inequalities. And the German government is, in July, publishing a report about the equality of regions. This has never been done before. Very detailed report with structural indicators combined with severe public opinion polling about how people in different regions see the infrastructure, development, and the local community at home. And we know from much research that there's a strong link between the assessment, the factual infrastructure locally, the assessment of this infrastructure by the people, and ideas about democracy, populism, right-wing affinity. So that's what I would bring in. I think we should talk more about the social cohesion on a regional level, which is a goal that is even included in our federal constitution. So there's also a link there. I think it just explains a lot. And last point, many people say that they very well know in what kind of region compared to other regions they live. So comparing regions with each other is also a factor in politics. So that would be my small idea, to talk more about the inequality of regions. I think it explains a lot, and a lot of stuff can be done about it, as this report says. Benedetta, I know it's a big question, but in what terms, in terms of renewal projects, are you thinking at the moment?
Yeah, first of all, I find this idea very interesting. I think this is cleavages that exist more already in the public perception in some countries than in others, but yeah, very interesting idea. From a European perspective, I think that also we need to see what is the reality of things today, and at the European level, we will certainly go towards having both a council and a commission that will be more conservative, and a European Parliament as well, although not as much as others would have wanted, I would say. So we have to deal with this, but I think also these last elections show us that it's possible that during the 5 years there will be reverses in the tendencies with the national elections coming, and we will see, I mean, now we have a string of elections until the end of the year that we will see what they bring. I think, though, that as progressives, we really need to continue on one hand, for sure, a very strong green transition track. We should never backtrack on this, because we know, and not only from our own guts, but really from also all the economic world, and also from everything that science tells us, that we can't backtrack anymore, also because of all the investment that already went there. But we, on the contrary, need to really give the green transition the more investment leg that it lacks, in order to, for Europe to use it as a, I don't know how you say it in English, but a volano, like something that allows the European economy to become more competitive, and therefore also to create a certain economic growth and stability that citizens are looking for. And I think that on the other hand, we need to be much, much, much bolder on how we finance this transition and on how much money we put in this transition, and not only on the transition, but really also on the social compensation that the transition requires, and especially on fiscal policy. I think we really, as progressives, we were shy. We were too shy. I think there is much more we can do to also make sure that we re-include some fairness in the way social policies are financed. I see that there is a huge demand from that perspective from citizens when it comes to major crises that are affecting our social services, housing, health, education. In so many countries, there is a problem with this, and I think we need to tackle it, and we need to be bold as progressives in the way we tackle it. At the same time, I think these European elections, for me, are also very worrying from the perspective of the youth vote, So I think that we need to do a lot to tackle youth preoccupations, and the fact that so many young people as first voters have been voting for the far right is really a very preoccupying symptom, although there is also some inequalities throughout Europe, because we have seen that, for example, in Italy, as I was telling earlier, there was a massive support from young people to progressive parties. So there is also diversity within Europe. But I think that is still a very preoccupying fact. And I think that there is so much more we can deliver to youth, also in the way we include youth into the participation into politics. And this is something that the Greens take really good care of normally, but probably there is more that we can do also in making redistribution policies that arrive to the hearts of people that really have are having struggles, and making them understand also that indeed in the green transition there is so much that can actually relieve also the financial constraints when it comes to housing and energy, for example.
So we have a bold, just transition, we have a focus on finance and investment, and we have a focus on the youth. All I would agree upon. How do you see that? Are those issues that you are thinking about? And I know, Carys, that you are responsible also for a project on the renewal aspect. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your way of thinking on this subject.
And you have taken three good ones there.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know.
So I think, reflecting on the last couple of days, we've heard again and again that incumbent social democratic parties are struggling and they're not managing to see off the far right. And just to say that I really hope that in 3 to 4 years there isn't a British person sitting here saying exactly what we've heard. I think we really need to learn the lessons and think about what a social democratic government can actually do for people, and how they can communicate that to make sure that those votes are kept. I think in terms of the project that we're doing, I think the other thing I would add is just that any successful political project needs to really understand the times that we live in. And so our starting point is to really take stock of how society and the economy has changed. And one of the key dimensions of that is shifting geopolitics. Again, we've discussed this a lot over the last couple of days. But clearly the boundaries between domestic economic policy and foreign policy are much more blurred than they used to be. Where our supply chains need to be is shifting. There are lots of other dimensions that I could go into, such as the regional inequality piece, the wealth inequality piece, the sense that things aren't working. And in our work, we're kind of sketching out each of those. I do think what it leads you to is that it is utterly essential that governments have clear economic plans for a just transition to make sure that process is fair. But that needs to look at the structures of the economy and who has power in the economy. And so I'm quite excited by some of the proposals you see in the UK, for example, to enhance workers' rights, to have a national wealth fund so that there's a kind of social return on some of the public investment going in, and also looking at our voting system and how we can reform democracy so that people feel that they genuinely have a say. And I think it's in that, how do you ensure that people have a sense of agency and power over their lives in the economy as well as in electoral voting systems that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, thank you very much for this good overview, and we wish you all good luck with that, of course. And we are very pleased that so many of you came to this conference from the UK, so that you are very interested, obviously, in what's happening on the continent. And we are always looking forward to invitations to London as well, right? Which brings me to Michael. We love to go to the US as well, by the way. Yeah.
Call me on November 6th.
Michael. In the midterm prospect, like in the next 1 to 5 years, what should and will be a project of renewal for the Democrats that can defeat Trumpism? Or will you basically continue the strategy that you started, IRA investments, talking about it? Or do you see anything new?
No, I think
developing?
That is a pretty progressive agenda for a US-based Democratic Party after the collective move of the entire political spectrum towards the right that started in the Reagan era, and all the way up to the Obama era, when we had visitors at the Center for American Progress, it was always ironic to see that US policy by this progressive president was positioned slightly to the right of German conservatives. That is now changing. We are kind of reattaching us to a more social liberal or social democratic program, and I think that needs to be implemented. I feel that the make or break point, maybe less for the United States, but very much for many other Western societies, is indeed diversity. Our societies will look differently in the future, and this is including all the issues that you have mentioned, I feel the make or break point, because this is a potential fissure in Western societies that will be dramatic. I mean, in 2050, average age here in Germany will be over 51 years, with 30% of the population entitled to pension payments. I mean, you do the math. This society will look different. Italy, Greece, Spain is even more dramatic in terms of fertility rates. Latin America is flatlining. Mexican cities like Monterrey, Guadalajara, Mexico City have fertility rates at the German level at 1.3, 1.4. And except for the Philippines and India, there's only one region that will be able to supply migration, qualified and not low-skilled, which is Africa. And I think unless you figure out a way from a progressive perspective to talk about diversity and migration in a constructive manner, you will run into massive problems given the economic challenges that the demographic decline, especially in Europe, will cause. We will start, if we ever finish that wall vis-a-vis Mexico at the Rio Grande, we will start chopping holes into that wall and dragging people over 25 years from now, because the United States will require, with all the retiring baby boomers, a lot of people that supply labor, manicure our gardens, and do the groceries and rebuild the country. And I feel this is, for the United States, a strategic advantage. Our Latino population in 2050 will be 31 years of age on average. That's the rejuvenating force of the American society. And there is something also to be had for transatlantic conversation on these issues.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Big topic for the next year's demographic change in Germany. Thank you all. Since we have 5 more minutes, I would like to ask each of you just the same question, and I ask for a short answer. You've been walking through the aisle here, listening to different conversations. I think, Benedetta, you came in a little bit later. So I'm sorry that you might not come up with a lot of stuff, but I wanted to ask you, what did you take away from the conference? What was this maybe one thought that you have that you found interesting, that you experienced?
Look, I found this, let's say, parallelism between experiences in Europe, UK, and the US very, very interesting, because it allows us to see also where do we stand. I take away that although we have a lot of signals and a lot of narratives that tells us that we should try to be more moderate, or like also lower our standards when it comes to human rights, or the idea that we have for inclusive society, democratic societies, and so on, we still have the power to reverse this tendency, and we should be actually bold and standing on our ground in claiming for the kind of society that we would like to see, while at the same time strategizing really and making alliances with the parts of the society, but also with parts of the society that are not so close to us. And I'm thinking here really like about the business world, for example. I really don't see how we can just let's say, the more moderate, liberal, conservative parts of the society slip towards far-right ideology, including those parts of the society that indeed have an interest in, making sure that there is economic stability, for example. How do you conciliate the need for economic stability, and so certainty about investment, for example, with these crazy cuckoo banana people that really want to govern our societies today. Like, I think we really need to speak to everyone we can, and also not let slip this part of the society that, on the contrary, is voting for the far right because they want to have change and they hope that these people will deliver change. Don't let them think that we don't want to talk to them. I think this has been a mistake that we have been doing during the last years as progressives, that we gave for granted that these people will not be people that would like to speak to us. And the fact that so many young people have voted for these parties makes me think that this is not true, because these people we can really speak to still. So we just need to find the language. So I think that this is really a takeover that I take out of this conference and in general of these periods where we have to rebuild a little bit our self-confidence as progressives.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very nice. Carys, I saw you taking notes, and what was the note that you liked the most, found the most interesting?
Well, I've already mentioned it, but I just think it's so striking how shared so many of these challenges are, and particularly this struggling of incumbents to deliver and communicate, and particularly, I guess, that second bit. And I think the takeaway for me, and I guess we're at quite a different kind of point in the political cycle, is the importance of making sure that the steps are put in place early to actually deliver on that change that people are voting for, because clearly that is what people are voting for, and making sure that that is really tangible. So what are the early wins that you can point to and say, this is how your life is different with a progressive government in place?
Thank you very much. Michael.
Look, I think my takeaway is that you initiated a conversation, starting with the title of the conference on progressive security, that is talking about responsibilities to defend self-determination and democracy, maintain prosperity in Western societies, but also be deeply concerned about the lack of investment in global governance and global inclusion. And all of that together is almost impossible to solve. I emphasize the almost, because I feel that everybody here in the room has been dedicated not to run away from these complexities, but to find solutions. And I feel that is energizing and reason for hope. Just one footnote: when you talked about the notion to talk more about regions, I saw our friend, the Spanish State Secretary, scratch his head, because he probably is happy that people were talking less about Catalonia and the Basque Country, because that has resulted in a good outcome for his political party. So I would just say we have to figure out how to frame our respective conversations in environments that are partially similar, but also very different at times.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do at those conferences, like Progressive Governance Conference. I was talking to some of the people of Das Progressive Zentrum. What do you think were the key messages of this conference? And we came up together with three. The first one is that progressive security is a complex but very important term. So we believe that it was the right choice to use this term as the headline for the conference, but it is not enough for progressives. We have to find strong messages on social mobility and change as well. Secondly, the topic of hope we found was, even though the times are tough, the question of hope was going around a lot. And this hope, the radiating confidence, radiating a better future, can be done if we stop focusing on convincing the citizens to prevent right-wing extremism, but focus more on our own narratives, and those narratives have to be linked to our principles. I think this was also a point that many of the conference people said. And then I would like to close this session with a note that I found very interesting by Patrick Gaspard yesterday. He said, "Successful election campaigns are never won by looking back, but always by looking into the future. But if you have achieved good things in government, you should link them to points in the future." So you can do both, but you have to do it in an intelligent way. yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for listening to us, to you three to discuss with us. And we now coming to the end of the conference, and I have the honor now for the final word. I hope everybody enjoyed the 2 days. I hope the multi-dimensional character of progressive security became clearer. I hope that many of you bring home new ideas, bag of insights, exchange new contacts, because that's also what this conference is for. And sure enough, this conference would not be able without the diligent work of many people behind the scenes. And I cannot mention all of the team of das Progressive Zentrum, but I tell you, I'm really, really proud of you. What you've done in the last, amazingly, really amazingly. I mean, this has been going on for weeks. We all can imagine what it means to bring people from all parts of the world to Berlin and so on. I just want to mention 3 people on behalf of the group. First one, of course, is Florian, Mr. Progressive Governance Conference, who I admire very much for his ability not to sleep. Paulina Fröhlich, thank you very much. Behind the scenes, very important. Deputy Director of das Progressive Zentrum. Very important with her organizational skills and for the team. And of course, the mastermind of das Progressive Zentrum and of the conferences, Dominik Schwickert, who I really admire for his commitment and his will to organize all this. Because I tell you this, without him, this would not be going on. So big applause for Dominik. And before I send you all to lunch, I will also like to take the time to thank the people in the Landesvertretung, the staff that helped us here in this building. I think that was a perfect location, and we felt very, very comfortable. I would like to thank the co-hosts and partners. I mean, this has been 24 organizations. They all work together. It's not easy to bring all this together. Thank you very much for your patience and for your energy. And last but not least, thank you very much to Maria. I think you have been a wonderful host. And I said to her, you should be the next moderator of a talk show on German television. Yeah, there you are. So, thank you very much, and I hope to see you on one of the next Progressive Governance conferences.